This video is sponsored by Skillshare. Dune's release on HBO Max and remaining markets around the world is imminent. I had the pleasure of seeing it in IMAX several weeks ago, and the more time I've had to digest it, the more I've come to appreciate it. Denis Villeneuve's Dune is an audiovisual achievement, with one notable hedge, namely the score by Hans Zimmer. To me, that is the weakest link in the proverbial chain that makes up Denis Villeneuve's Dune, even though it perfectly fits and augments the movie. But, I hear you ask, if it fits so well, what's the problem? Well, we shall see. In this editorial, I will begin by breaking down the importance of a movie score and point by point explore which functions it should fulfill. Then I'll go through what Hans Zimmer himself said about how he approached scoring Dune, and where I think he veered off course. While the merits of Hans Zimmer's score can and will be discussed, Denis Villeneuve's Dune is nonetheless an audiovisual feast. Delivering on the promise of the poster for the David Lynch version, it really is a movie beyond imagination. If that inspires you to explore your own creativity, then that's where Skillshare comes into the picture, and they have you covered. Skillshare, this video sponsor, is an online learning community for creatives where you can explore new skills, deepen existing passions, and get lost in creativity to find your way. Skillshare offers classes in topics such as music, photography, film and video production, creative writing, entrepreneurship, and freelancing. Whether you're just starting out, or you're already a working creative wanting to up your game, Skillshare has classes to fit your skill level and your schedule. Classes are usually under 60 minutes, and include a combination of video lessons and a class project, enabling you to quickly acquire new skills. For instance, say you want to become a YouTuber, or you're already one trying to grow your channel despite the algorithm seemingly working against you. Then the 12 lessons in the class YouTube Analytics and SEO Masterclass, rank number 1 on YouTube, with Nader Najad is for you. Since Skillshare sponsors this video, we naturally have a deal for you. The first 1,000 of our subscribers to click the link in the description will get 1 month free trial of Skillshare Premium membership, so you can explore your creativity. So click the link in the description to sign up, and then we'll get back into the matter of scoring Dune. Unlike a soundtrack, which is usually comprised of pre-recorded songs from different bands and musicians that fit the movie's mood and tone, a movie's score refers to the original musical imagery that is composed specifically for that movie. The purpose of the score is to add another dimension to the picture, augmenting the visuals and the on-screen narrative. There are many things a score must do in order to achieve that, and it is beyond the scope of this video to go through them all, but here are some of the most important ones. Create atmosphere. This is one of the most important functions a soundtrack serves in any movie, as the score not only emphasizes the atmosphere, it helps set the tone from the very beginning. A great score should instantly prime the audience for the genre and the level of drama, adventure, or comedy to follow. Some great examples here include Howard Shore's score for Silence of the Lambs, where the tone is set over a training montage in the woods, and Christopher Young's score for the original HELLRAISER, where the music alone establishes the atmosphere over nothing but white lettering over a black background. There are loads and loads of more examples here, so let me know some of your favorite ones in the comments. Another major function of a score is physiological conditioning. That is, to stimulate the audience's basic emotions, like for instance fear, which produces a physiological reaction, like a racing heart and sweaty palms. This is especially used in horrors and thrillers, where the audience is blasted with fear-inducing infrasound, but also across the board to create a sense of urgency. One of the masters here is actually Hans Zimmer, and his score for Interstellar is one of the finest examples. A great score also provides tacit commentary. in that it underlines key developments and dramatic shifts. A great example of this is in Stanley Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey, when it dawns on the first man that random bone lying over there would make an excellent tool for bludgeoning enemies and killing prey. A great score also emphasizes major actions and events, such as the Saturn V launch and subsequent moon landing in Damien Chazelle's First Man, scored by Justin Hurwitz. In a related manner, a great score also emphasizes emotion, as the music serves to get into the emotions of the characters. A face with a neutral expression can be pushed into feeling many different things just by what kind of music is used. The same way, certain emotions can be evoked within the audience. For an example of how important this is, try watching any scene from Halloween without John Carpenter's score.
Fate caught up with several lives here. No matter what course of action Collins took, he was destined to his own fate. Fate caught up with several lives here.
That scene, and the movie as a whole, would not be what it is without it. Furthermore, a great score also aids in visualizing scale and relative size, meaning how small and powerless something is compared to something else. A great example here is from the original Star Wars, where John Williams' score communicates not just a difference in scale between the Rebel ship and the Star Destroyer, but the difference in power and reach between the Empire and the Rebellion. Similarly, in the opening shots of Spaceballs, John Morris' score emphasized not only the sheer size of Spaceball 1, but harkening back to the first point, it primed the audience for parody and satire. A great score, of course, does more than this. These are just some of the more important functions that a score serves that you may not have consciously thought about. And as a viewer, you don't have to. With a great score, you'll subconsciously pick up on the extra dimension the score adds, without necessarily being consciously aware of it. One of the masters of this craft is Hans Zimmer. Hans Zimmer is one of the most prolific film score composers in cinema history, writing over 100 original scores in his storied career. He won an Oscar for his composing work in The Lion King, and in recent years, he has worked extensively with Christopher Nolan, scoring both his Batman movies, as well as Inception and Interstellar. For DC films, he scored both Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, and Wonder Woman 1984. And for Denis Villeneuve, he worked on Blade Runner 2049 before taking on Dune. His approach to Dune, however, was somewhat unique. In an interview published October 14th, Hans Zimmer told IGN, "What science fiction scores do is they create an enormous amount of freedom for the composer to go and invent a world and to be sonically free, and to use colors that maybe haven't existed before. Because literally, you are being asked to create a world. Between the way it looks and the way it sounds, you're creating the world." He told IGN that one of his favorite sci-fi scores was John Williams' score for Star Wars, but he had one reservation with it, saying, "I remember as a kid, and this is absolutely not criticism, it was just a childlike observation going to see Star Wars. And as those letters, those words keep floating over your head and a galaxy far away, and you hear trumpets and cellos and conventional instruments. And I was going, shouldn't those instruments be strange and foreign, and shouldn't they be from another galaxy as well?" So in other words, Zimmer liked the Star Wars score, but he didn't like the classical musical instruments from our world that had gone into making it. Take note of that, because on Dune, he was therefore going in a very otherworldly direction. Zimmer told IGN he worked very closely with sound designer Theo Green to make sure the score and the film's overall sound complemented each other. And indeed, Dune does, in my opinion, have one of the best sound designs ever put on film. In creating the score itself, though, Zimmer worked closely with musician, sculptor and welder Chas Smith and guitarist Guthrie Govan. Their challenge, according to Zimmer, was that we kept hearing things in our heads which were impossible to describe and impossible to make. He further added that the creation of the score was just people working at the very edge of the precipice of what was possible. So again, pushing the limits, trying to create a distinct otherworldly sound. To this end, Zimmer even synthesized all the percussion in the score, and brought in anachronistic elements, such as bagpipes, that may seem at odds with the sci-fi score, but it worked for Dune. Or more specifically, their blaring worked for the feudal Harkonnens. Ultimately though, it was Dune itself, the desert planet Arrakis, that dictated what Hans Zimmer's Dune soundtrack would sound like. It's the wind that not so much roars, that just whistles across the desert, that sings across the desert wind, which sort of is a huge inspiration and a huge way of just going, oh hang on a second, everybody has to live within that environment. Everybody's going to be affected by the sound of the actual planet itself. That doesn't mean it's all about nature, as Zimmer also told IGN. At the same time, of course, it's a pretty uncompromising score, and it barks at you, and then it bites you. It's not one of those dogs that just bark. The end result of that experimentation is a score unlike any other. When combined with the imagery and fused with it through the sound design, Hans Zimmer's score perfectly suits and augments the imagery of Denis Villeneuve's Dune. It ticks every box on the great score checklist. On an IMAX screen, the complete audiovisual experience of visuals, score and sound design will transport you to another world. In some ways, the Dune score is Zimmer's best work, but I submit that in other ways it is also among his worst, because what happens when you're not watching it in IMAX? Many of the greatest soundtracks of all time are instantly recognizable. It doesn't take many seconds to recognize the music from Star Wars, Jaws, Indiana Jones, The Terminator, Lord of the Rings, Pirates of the Caribbean, Titanic, Harry Potter, Conan the Barbarian, and the list goes on. You could even include the score from the original Dune, as that too is epic and instantly recognizable, instantly hummable. These scores are all intrinsically tied to the movies they were made for, but if you were to isolate them from the movie, they nonetheless have a life of their own. Some of the best soundtracks are masterpieces in their own right, even without the accompanying movie. But if you were to isolate Zimmer's score for Dune, however, then you'd be left with what I can best describe as headache-inducing industrial noise. In going so experimental, in taking such measures to avoid anything that sounds like classical musical instruments. Ambient industrial is what Zimmer created. There are some that like industrial, and more power to you if you do, but it's not for everyone. Consider for a moment Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy. That movie is notable not just for its score by Tyler Bates, which incidentally also ticked every box on the great score checklist, but for its period soundtrack of popular music from the 70s. Upon that movie's release, Gunn told Vulture that he wanted the songs to help ease the audience into the movie. We're thrust onto a bunch of strange planets with strange landscapes, and the familiarity of the pop songs made it all a little bit more palatable. They simultaneously grounded us and provided a really fun juxtaposition. The soundtrack, comprised of 70 songs, was of course a unique fit for that particular movie, but James Gunn's reasoning is applicable beyond. Going back to Star Wars, one could argue that John Williams' orchestral score similarly served to ground the audience. The music was bombastic and otherworldly, but the tunes were memorable and the instruments that produced them were classic. More than that, from our human vantage point, they were universal. I do believe that the young Hans Zimmer's complaint about the instruments clearly being of our world is something of a minority complaint. In his desire to create something otherworldly for Dune, he succeeded in creating a score which perfectly fit the visuals, and which ticks every box a score is supposed to. But many scores can tick such boxes without being memorable, or without having any kind of tunes or melodies that stick with you once you leave the theater. For all its other virtues, this longevity, if you will, is something I think Zimmer's Dune score lacks. This is my personal complaint, of course, so mileage will vary. I'm not saying that Zimmer's score is bad, not by any stretch. What I am saying though, is that I think the movie could have been even better served if the composer hadn't been so preoccupied with making a score that wouldn't ground the audience. There are issues with that as well. That is my view at any rate. Do you agree or disagree? In any event, let me know your thoughts in the comments. And before you go, if you feel inspired, remember to click the link in the description, so you too can explore your creativity and be among the 1,000 to get a 1-month free trial of premium Skillshare membership.